It is the Pete Souza Show, and we roll on. We're presented by Slovaceks, Crawford, Austin Property, D1. Thanks to everybody that's involved. Daniel Stark Injury Lawyers. Also who is involved is Matt Mosley. Matt Mosley next year will be making his way back from, at this point in time, Santa Clara, California, covering the Cowboys in the Super Bowl, because that's where next year's Super Bowl is. And it starts, Matt, in my opinion, by the way, Matt has said none of this, just so you know. He's joining us now. But it'll start with some offseason moves. And can you verify, debunk some of the scuttlebutt going around out there about Micah Parsons possibly being packaged in some kind of deal by the Cowboys?
Well, Pete, great to be back with you. On the Monday after the Super Bowl, and I can't imagine how thrilled you are with lots of things right now, not the least of which is the Philadelphia Eagles pulling off a win for the ages and just absolutely annihilating the Chiefs, which I know we'll get into. But yesterday at some point, a report came out from Ian Rappaport, NFL Network, that the Cowboys were having internal discussions about a possible Micah Parsons trade and what that would look like. And, you know, to a fan base that is already reeling from this just nonsense, the Luka Doncic trade, which again, it's really hard to fathom. The more you find out, the more, you know, and even with Anthony Davis already being on the shelf for who knows, could be more than a month. After his first game, he's strained an adductor muscle. I don't know if I have one of those, but it's you know, looking at this Parsons thing, I don't know. You say debunk. I have a hard time thinking they're going to do this. I thought it was interesting that CeeDee Lamb immediately clapped back on Twitter, on social media, and just basically said, "Why are we doing this again? You know, why does this have to happen every year?" Of course, he was rumored, and would they ever think about trading him? So I don't think this is going to happen, but this does not help the Cowboys right now with their fan base that is already upset, not really overly excited about this new coach. And Pete, let's also throw in the fact that Kellen Moore just called plays for a team that won the Super Bowl and had a tremendous offensive performance, especially in the passing game. And then he'll go to the New Orleans Saints. So, and of course, watching the hated rivals win a Super Bowl, it's a really just it's just salt in the wound for a fan base that is already pretty upset. This Micah Parsons talk.
In your knowledge, dealing with Jerry, what's his reaction to a division rival winning the Super Bowl?
Well, I'll tell you, you know, I heard people talking about last night, even somebody was telling me that was at my Super Bowl watching party, which basically it wasn't a big deal. I think I had a little dried sausage and a couple of pieces of cheese.
I didn't get an invite, so.
Well, believe me, the people that got invited, I don't think were that happy to be there. No, it was not a big affair. My family had left me to go to Disney World. They're flying back last night. My wife usually puts together a beautiful spread. I was not able to come up with much, although I did, go to a German deli, pick up a few items. But here's the deal. Well, I did get to hole up a few years ago with Jeff Lurie, the owner of the Eagles. And, like a lot of owners, he hated Dan Snyder. But what was funny is he loved Jerry. I don't know if that's changed since then, but I do remember that conversation. He just kept bringing up the fact of how much he loved Jerry Jones. Maybe he just loves him because Jerry makes such bad decisions. But it is interesting how far this has come. I think I've told you the story before, Pete. I was in Howie Roseman's office circa 2008 or 9, and the Cowboys had just won a division title, and like on his dry erase board was the Eagles sort of projected too deep or starting lineup, and the Cowboys. And so at that point, they were obsessed with catching up and surpassing the Cowboys. Now, fast forward to now, I mean, think about that. If they were going to be matching themselves up with anybody in this division, it would be the Commanders. The Cowboys are the third best team in this division. So all that to say is, in Jerry's twisted mind, somehow he's made himself like think that this is good for the division or good for the Cowboys. I promise you, he will not have the takeaway that a lot of Cowboys fans would hope. What they hope is he feels some level of like humiliation right now. And I just don't think he's capable of that. Like he somehow will, there's some takeaway in him. If we talked to him this morning, where he would think that somehow the NFC East team winning it all means that the other teams in the division are that much closer to doing it, which is you have to take so many leaps of logic. So I can't totally take you there and connect all the dots, but I'm just saying, having been around him for years, he's somehow getting to that outcome in his head, that a win, it's almost like, listen, if a Big 12 school or two get to the Final Four and it's not, one of them's not Scott Drew, Scott would still be like on cloud 9 because of the way it represents the conference. Jerry kind of has that mindset. So again, anybody hoping he feels humiliation, I think you would be let down. That's not really how his mind works.
How do you think Nico Harrison's mind is working right now? And I ask you that question because the trade is, as far as I'm concerned, personnel malpractice. I don't think that we need to, like, it's just simple. The trade sucked. Was it because of a personnel opinion that Nico had with, and I, this is my opinion on it as I ask you the question, but like, I feel like there's so many cooks in the kitchen now in these NBA organizations. Like, you know, if you're not making every single workout, if you're blowing off the nutritionist, if you're coming in out of shape, like there's a lot of people that are campaigning against you, right? Because it's the disrespect of them and their services. So I think obviously there could be that. But then how much does ownership come into play? Like, I feel like with every bad sports organization, at the head of the snake, there's a really, really bad owner. And I feel like, and I don't ever want to say Jerry's a bad owner because I think what he's done for the Cowboys is exceptional, but obviously a lot of people would love him to step away from the personnel decisions. But in the respect with the Mavs, what was behind that decision? What have you learned from talking to people in your circles? And I know you talk to a lot of folks that are dialed in media-wise and hoops-wise, more football than anything, right? But you're privy to these conversations. What are you hearing?
Well, first of all, I get a kick out of everybody acting like these are like huge revelations, that he was out of shape or out of conditioning. I mean, like Reggie Miller and others were saying that, just kind of looking at him at one point, and it's always been out there. So, you know, I do think, and by the way, I was a mentor, and I think he would admit this, for Tim McMahon, who at ESPN, and he's taken a huge beating right now, because when he reported all this about the Mavs getting tired of the conditioning and all, people read into that he's carrying the water for Nico and Mavs management. You know, the thing about Tim is he goes after everybody. He antagonizes almost everybody, including Luka, Cuban. So it's equal opportunity. So he's generally not someone who's going to, that said, he probably is trying to keep a decent relationship with Nico. And I mean, I agree with you. It's a bad deal all the way around. Not the least of which he misread the room so historically, in the sense that this was an organization that had Dirk Nowitzki for over 20 years, right? And then they were able to like go right in to having Luka, and it just is extremely. I mean, everything was going to work. I mean, think about that. You were going to have Dirk and Luka, these European superstars, for a combined maybe 35 to 40 years. And so to not understand that is it's just crazy. And you made a point that I think it may be right. I think somehow this Nico Harrison was almost like somehow got personally offended, whether it was by this whole team of people Luka brought in. It became personal, and you can't let it become personal, especially when, I mean, the dumb part of the trade is, first of all, if he's out of shape, can you imagine what he was when he was in shape? Can you imagine, like, he was elevating his game in the postseason to like 32 points, 10 rebounds, 10 assists. He was averaging a 30-point triple-double in the postseason. And honestly, he had emerged as one of the greatest postseason players of all time. He drags one team to the Western Conference Finals. Then he takes a team to the NBA Finals, where they ran into Boston. And, of course, Kyrie shrinks anytime he sees Boston, if it's in the postseason especially. And, I mean, it's just unreal. I just don't think we have really anything to compare it to. So, yeah, I would say, from what I can gather, you just have you have two things at work. You have Nico somehow getting some kind of personal thing going with Luka. And then on top of it, and here's the sleazy part of this, and Pete, you worked in the NBA, and you know how these relationships work, and you know sometimes how some agents are closer to organizations than others. Some agents they like working with more than others. Well, Nico, having worked with Rob Pelinka when he was Kobe's agent for all those years, there became some kind of close relationship. So this is where it looks really sleazy, because it looks like Nico gave a close friend a brother-in-law type deal. And that's, I think, the sickening part to fans. By not bringing anybody else into these conversations, you did not get the full value for Luka. So first of all, you blow up your fan base by trading a beloved player. And then two, you don't get the value for him that you needed. And so, I mean, again, I think malpractice is a fair way to characterize this.
I believe truly the ownership component is huge here as well. I don't think this is a trade that Mark Cuban would ever have allowed. And I think that bad ownership can be convinced and manipulated. And, you know, you got to give the ownership a little bit of grace, because they hire these guys and they trust them, right? So if they sell you a bill of goods, that's unfortunate, but ultimately it's your product, and you're accountable, right, as the owner, because these teams are more, you know, they're like public trusts in a way. And to deny these fans the opportunity to continue to watch one of the greatest players, a generational talent, because a GM's got a bug up his ass is a real shame.
Yeah, and you know, the ownership is a strange group, right? You got Miriam Adelson, and then
Dumont.
the Patrick Dumont. And I mean, I was listening to those comments, and I guess Brad Townsend of the Morning News recorded that conversation on his phone. I'm sure he told Patrick he was, because I know Brad, and that's the way he does things. But to hear Patrick Dumont, I mean, like, I think he's already getting clowned on, because he comes across as, oh, this hard. I mean, oh my gosh, the only way you can be a Mav is to work every day for it. And you report, this is the kind of people we want. And of course, immediately people said, buddy, you're a Nepo, son-in-law who married into this fortune, and don't come on here talking about your amazing work ethic or something like that. So again,
like
these
this
people,
is West Point,
Oh yeah. Well, that's how he sounded. Yeah, you've seen the guy. I mean, it looks like. I mean, he's got kind of a Mad Magazine look to him. He's got the haircut. To me, he presents a little bit like the Las Vegas Raiders owner. Got a little Mark Davis quality to him. I feel like he's just a heartbeat away from one of those Prince Valiant haircuts. I feel like that's really what he wants. And Miriam, his mother-in-law, won't let him get one. I mean, it's a strange group, and so he was just, to me, spouting out some talking points, from Nico, and then again, that was an interesting thing. It's like, oh my gosh, it's reported Nico's getting death threats. Well, it turns out, of course, the police didn't say they were not even notified of anything. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't, but the crowd did what they were supposed to do the other day. And by the way, I had a ticket, and this is my dedication to Baylor basketball. I needed to be dialed into Baylor rather than go to that game. But I wanted to be there just to kind of see what the crowd would do. But, people, I thought that was a dumb thing the other night. And I like Allie LaForce, but she had some report. She said, they're worried that they're giving the players extra security. What fan in their right mind was going to boo any of those players? They didn't do anything.
Yeah.
Like even Anthony Davis, and I love. Did you see Anthony Davis like early in that game? He goes on a tear, and he's screaming to the fans, "I'm here now." And I mean, everybody was cheering for him. So there was no boo. There was no reason to boo any of the players, and they didn't.
I thought that was a real misrepresentation of Mavs fans. And then this isn't a shot at your Tim McMahon, but then he talked about the racist stuff, and I was like, oh gosh, what are we doing here? Like, let's just keep it to pure sports hate.
Yeah, I don't know.
The healthy sports hate. That's
yeah. I didn't know what that was about, but who knows? But there's always going to be some nut job in any fan base, right? And then of course that's what's happened, for years. I think our friends from Boston would say that they all get painted. Of course, Philly fans, for instance, you've had to deal with it. You have like the battery thing, you have the Santa thing, and then then everybody gets thrown in that thing for the next 40 years. It's like ridiculous.
All right, last thing, because I know you're busy. What was your number one takeaway from last night's Super Bowl? It can be anything. It can be part of the broadcast, a commercial you thought was great. A commercial you thought sucked? I love the Harrison Ford commercial. That was like, outside of the Eagles' domination, that was my second favorite part. But what grabbed you yesterday?
What grabbed me the most was just the utter domination of that defense, and watching a man that we had started to kind of see in sort of mythical, ways that it was almost kind of like, even in the past when Patrick Mahomes lost, we sort of were able to sort of blame it on other things. Oh, they didn't have the right tackles. They didn't have the right O-line. And I'm sure that played a part in it yesterday. But to watch him make those throws, to get picked, the pick six, the Bond, diving across, I just think it's always jolting and kind of wild when you see like a guy that again is almost some sort of superhero show, that at least for one day he didn't have his powers. And I think Vic Fangio and that whole group, they deserve a lot of credit. And the offense did what it needed to do. But the defense and those guys, Pete, because you're an Eagles fan, you know these people, but the rest of America, Milton, what is his name? Milton Williams. I mean, you're just like, and we know about Jalen, but just that whole line. I mean, like Brandon Graham is retiring, and so and Sweat was unbelievable. And think about it, Sweat took a major step back. I think it was in 2023, and yet that whole line, and they didn't have to blitz at all.
No, that's
I couldn't help but think. I couldn't help but think back to the old Eagles defensive coordinator who's no longer with us, Jim Johnson.
Oh, yeah.
And like, he was a blitz happy. He loved to blitz almost more than anybody in the NFL. And I thought, man, how interesting is that? Then of course McDermott followed him, and then McDermott ends up with the Bills. But how we've ended up going from the guy that loves to blitz more than anything to a guy who didn't have to blitz the entire game. He just let a front four, and those unbelievable quarterbacks like Brady and like Mahomes. That's the only time they've ever it's when you have a front four who can do it without the blitz. And the Giants did it, as you recall,
yes,
with Tuck and all those guys, and Osi Umenyiora. I mean, that's the only time those quarterbacks just completely lose it. And man, to see Mahomes struggle that mightily, that was a sight like, you just don't see it very often.
That's a brilliant point, because Brady talked about that in the week leading up to the broadcast about what makes him so good. What made him so good was like the diagnosis, like before the snap, he can read where the pressure's coming from or how it's going to come. And you can figure out where the ball's probably going to go before it's even snapped. They didn't have that opportunity last night. Speaking of Brady, I lied. This is my last thing for you, I promise. What kind of separation now is between Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes when you talk about the greatest of all time conversation?
Well, I mean, you have the total Super Bowls, and I still think it's going to be tough for Mahomes to get there. Kansas City has the one thing they have, and Mahomes has on Brady, is Brady took a break in there. There was a span, and I do think the Chiefs, much like the Gonzaga thing, I always come back to, where they have all those straight Sweet 16s. I think it's one of the most amazing. I think 9 straight Sweet 16s. I think that's one of the most amazing things in sports. Well, the Mahomes and the Chiefs have been to 7 straight AFC title games. I mean, that's unheard of. So I think the only thing Mahomes has on Brady is just the sort of the consistency year after year after year. But I after watching that last night, I don't think Mahomes is going to catch him in the overall Super Bowl. So, I still think Tom stands alone at this point, and we'll see what the Chiefs do. I mean, the Chiefs, it's not like they're going to have to just blow up the whole thing, but to watch Kelsey not be able to be dominant in the game and Mahomes not have time to find him. I mean, you felt like you were watching the end of something, certainly not the end of Mahomes, but we may see Kelsey, exit stage right here and join his brother as just a full-time podcaster.
Yeah.
And then it would take, I mean, what are we going to do without Taylor at these games? I mean, we may see a major dip in ratings.
Well, you and me will figure it out. I can promise you that. All right, Matt Mosley, check him out today on ESPN Central Texas, Cowboys insider, and he was outside last night because the Cowboys were in the Super Bowl. But I think next year we may be seeing you in Santa Clara. For now, we will see you later. Matt Mosley, baby. Thanks, Mose.
You bet. Talk to you soon.
All right, that was Matt Mosley, the Pete Souza Show, presented by Slovacics. We march on after this.